Tonight, KI News investigates about money, influence, and mental health.
Doctors at state-run mental health centers are required to use a step-by-step treatment guide for patients. The people who put that guide together came to the conclusion that when it comes to mental health patients, the plan is to medicate first, then if there are any leftover symptoms, try psychotherapy. The specific drugs doctors are supposed to use in the treatment of Texas mental health patients are some of the most expensive on the market. KI News Investigates found a correlation between the amount of money certain pharmaceutical companies gave to the state and the amount of drugs prescribed. In tonight's KI News Investigates, Nancy Wilson reports your tax dollars paid for more than $245 million worth of drugs just last year.
This is an antipsychotic drug called Zyprexa. It costs $7.61 per pill. This is a similar antipsychotic drug called haloperidol. It costs 8 cents per pill. But doctors in every state-run mental health facility are required to prescribe the more expensive drug. Why? Because of a program called tmap. It stands for the Texas Medical Algorithm Project. It's a step-by-step guide for treating mental illness, complete with a list of which drugs to use. We found not only are the people who design the list paid consultants to the pharmaceutical industry, we found the drug companies whose medications are on the list made large donations to the state mental health department. Donations to the tune of more than $2 million. Dr. Stephen Sean is the Texas Medical Director and oversees the project.
Now, people might interpret, well, because the state of Texas receives pharmaceutical dollars, then there must be influence going on there. And I could see where somebody who doesn't understand this process might initially interpret it that way. But we have just been so painstakingly careful about trying to keep that separate.
We wanted to know how they kept it separate. So far, it appears they don't. Requesting information through the Texas Open Records Act, an agency has 10 days to produce the information. So far, that's not what's happened. It's been 6 months, and we still don't have a complete picture about what happened to the money donated by the pharmaceutical companies. We tried to interview Commissioner of Health and Human Services Albert Hawkins. We sent him a list of 9 questions. He didn't answer any of them, but he did respond with this letter touting the success of the tmap program. Hawkins says he sees no problem accepting money from the companies that stand to make millions if its drugs are on the recommended list. He writes, donations were not used in the development of the tmap guidelines, and the acceptance of donations does not represent a conflict of interest. However, we found the agency's own records suggest otherwise. According to these documents, the Mental Health Board approved to accept a total of $12,000 from Eli Lilly and Forest Lab, $30,000 from drug maker Wyeth Arist, $40,000 from AstraZeneca, more than $56,000 from Janssen Pharmaceuticals, and more than $71,000 from Pfizer. The purpose of the donations? To help fund the collaborative effort to develop medication best practices for the treatment of major depression, schizophrenia, and bipolar disorders. In other words, to help develop the tmap guidelines. All of the companies that made donations ended up with at least one of the drugs on the recommended list.
Well, I think that that's illegal. I mean, I've never heard of a government agency getting donations from a pharmaceutical company and then being in a sort of a dual relationship with them. The state agency is supposed to oversee them, regulate them, make sure that they're behaving. It's not supposed to be their advocate.
We found in some cases money from the drug companies wasn't as obvious. Records show Texas Medical Director Stephen Sean faxed copies of his travel expenses from a presentation he made in Pennsylvania promoting the use of tmap to Janssen Pharmaceuticals' New Jersey office. It totaled $1,765.75. Janssen cuts a check for the amount, but makes it out to the Harrisburg State Hospital. The hospital deposits the check and issues one for the same amount payable to Dr. Stephen Sean in Texas. Public Citizens President Joan Claybrook says it's wrong.
It's shocking, absolutely shocking. Conflict of interest, absolute conflict of interest. They should not be allowed to do that.
Records show the funds that paid Dr. Sean's expenses came from the Risperdal marketing account. The reason? tmap initiative to expand atypical usage. Atypicals are a class of drugs that include Risperdal. We've also found that some of the money from the drug companies did not go through the proper approval process. By law, any donation over $500 must get approval from the Mental Health Board of Directors. Looking through minutes of every board meeting since 1996, we found that of the more than $2 million pharmaceutical companies donated to the state, about half, more than $900,000, was never approved by the board. So what does this mean to you? Well, the majority of patients that go to state-run mental health facilities are on Medicaid. When doctors are required to prescribe the most expensive medications first, it's money out of your pocket. Nancy Wilson, KI News investigates.
The Texas Department of Health is expected to roll out its children's version of the tmap program later this year. Nancy will stay on the story, follow the money, and let you know where it leads.